Hey, Father Michael here. When I was growing up in a different land, a different era entirely, uh, growing up as the eldest and arguably the most super charming and smartest of all the children in the household, well, at least the sneakiest and the most creative, especially when it came to getting other people in trouble. It seemed that my siblings and I were always arguing over nonsense, just the most ridiculous little things, like when we'd all pile in the car, you know? Mom, he's on my side. She looked at me. Oh my goodness. I don't know how my parents, kept their sanity or didn't at least have a few homicides under their belt dealing with that from six kids all the time. Yikes. A lot of that nitpicking and that petty arguing really went back to that whole cycle of tattling. Somebody tattled on somebody else, and then this whole storm of craziness would erupt. And to be fair, this was most often the tactic of my suck up goody goody sister, Kathy. She was the only one with glasses, so of course we had to pick on her for having four eyes. And she was also such a little goody two shoes that we didn't want to hang out with her because you knew that if you did something that was not quite correct, she was going to tattle on your ass. And so we didn't want to hang out with her. And depending on my parents' mood at the time, man, she was really frequently successful in getting us into trouble. And so that's when we had to change our tactic. We had to bribe her with candy or or a popsicle, or take her to the playground. Just suck it up and spend some time with her as a way of bribing her, manipulating her into keeping her big mouth shut. But the reverse rarely happened. If one of us tried to, be the tattletale on Kathy, we were mostly told, what does that have to do with you? You just worry about yourself. That is also a scenario that has presented itself throughout my many years of education, both as a student and as a teacher. It is straight up amazing to me how many high school students, when you're in high school, you are like trying so hard to present yourself as a grown ass man or woman, and yet, and yet, it's amazing how quickly that all falls to the side when there's a chance to tattle on somebody else, especially if they think by tattling on somebody else and getting them in trouble that they themselves will somehow get excused for not having done their damn homework. and so, oh my goodness, I never expected to have to repeat my mother's words to, high school students later on in my life. But there I was for basically 15 years, all the while I taught, saying to them, what does that have to do with you? Just do your work. Oh my God. So here I am, 5 years after retirement, coming up on the 5th anniversary of the day I walked out of that place and said, take this job and shove it. Not quite that politely. 5 years later, and I still hear adult tattling. all the time. Oh my goodness. From grown people in recovery, in treatment, as they make their way through the program. They want to know how come somebody else gets to change their levels of care before they get to change their level of care, even though they've been here longer. And they demand to know why somebody else gets a weekend pass or better phone privileges or access to their vehicle before they do, because it's just not fair. It's weird, but they're quick to tattle about incidental, nonsensical things, but they're slow to reveal things that really should be revealed. You know, things that should be reported. Somehow we don't get around to sharing that. And as an agency and as a person in the agency, our collective response is the same. What does this have to do with you? Just worry about yourself. Keep your side of the street clean. Please. At the end of John's Gospel, chapter 21, not very many chapters, but my goodness, there are some long solo speeches by Jesus in there. But at the end of the Gospel, chapter 21, there's a long discussion apparently going on among Jesus's disciples about, you guessed it, who's really following him and who needs to do their job better. And at some point in the discussion, the focus of the tattling falls on that unnamed disciple who leaned his head against Jesus' breast at the Last Supper and asked who it was who was going to betray him. We assume that that is John, the presumed author of the Gospel of John, but we don't really know who this favorite disciple was. He's not named, or maybe she's not named. Either way, Jesus says to the group in, the very last few sentences of that gospel, guys, if I want this beloved disciple to remain alive until I come back, what's it to you? You just have to follow me. In other words, keep your own side of the street clean and leave the rest to me. There is a tendency, unfortunately, even in people of faith, to revert to this tattletale mentality. We are so quick to reveal the faults of people that we don't like, or especially those who have harmed us personally or taken advantage of us, or who somehow seem to have an easier time of living this life than we do. I heard this a lot from some Christians during the previous administration as they tried to defend the indefensible, like locking up children in cages and letting them become the victims of sex abuse and violence, and then trying to shift that whole conversation elsewhere. Try to be little tattletales and say, well, Obama, look at Obama. Oh my goodness. Come on. That's the problem with North American Christianity in general. It is becoming the civil religion with political tenets of faith above religious tenets of faith. And the adherents of this civil religion delight in passing judgment on other people because they're mostly white and they're mostly feeling super entitled. I find myself sometimes sucked into that same tattletale mindset, and I'm struggling not to go there sometimes. And so I think it's helpful for me, and maybe for you, to think about that last chapter of John's Gospel, as well as the scolding of my mother, some 50 years after the fact. I have to stop and ask myself, okay, so these people are doing this thing here that I find morally repugnant. Okay, but really, so what? What does that have to do with me? Just worry about yourself, Michael, and follow Christ. It's not even that deep. Christmas Day is over. I hope that all of you watching this had a great one. I had a very fine one yesterday. It was absolutely a blessing, and I am grateful. But here's the thing. December 25th is past, and so has the charitable giving season in the United States for approximately the next 9 or 10 months, despite the fact that needy people will still have needs in the intervening months. But instead of focusing on what other people are forgetting to do or not doing, I've decided this time around, I'm going to simply focus on myself and on what I am doing with my resources. The only way this world gets any better is if the individual players within the world get better. There is nothing that you and I can do about anybody else. And if you're a parent and your kids are over like the age of 5 or 6, you already know there is virtually nothing you can do. They're going to be who they are, with your blessing or without your blessing. They're their own little people. And they're done listening to you, certainly by the time they hit first grade. But they're watching, and they're observing, and they're learning what it means to be a man or a woman or a dad or a mom. So as we round the bend, these last few days of 2021, let's maybe resolve to not be tattletales in the coming year. Let's just focus on ourselves. Let's focus on what we can do as individuals and as members of our faith community to continue the giving, to continue this spirit of Christmas that we sing about for, 3 months starting on Halloween, and make this more than just a sentimental outlook, so that we can finally make some progress socially as well as spiritually. Pray with me. Loving, mighty God, creator of all that is, bringer of joy and gladness and insight, we come into your holy presence in this moment, eager to listen to your word spoken within our hearts, and remembering the words of your Christ. What is it to you? All you have to do is follow me. Help us today to be less focused on what other people are doing, and instead to own our own actions and our own thinking. And where we see need for improvement, help us to make those changes. And in the spirit of Christmas, help us to keep the doors of our heart open as wide as we can get them as we move into the new year. Amen. great day.